So the NFL apparently tried to hide this because it looks like a collusion attempt happened after a certain quarterback was awarded a massive payday a few seasons ago. Well, now that a quote-unquote secret 61-page document was revealed, I can see why they wanted to keep this buried, as it's a pretty bad look on the league. So I've got to unpack all of that in today's video, along with Daniel Jones seeming to run away with the QB job in Indy, Aaron Rodgers letting us know something we all knew already, and more right after. Alright, first up, if my voice sounds funny, it's because it does, because I'm getting a cold or something, which is kind of weird for it almost being July, but whatever. Let's get into this video. It looks like we may potentially have some good news for Colts fans. Anthony Richardson expects to be good to go for training camp, at least. That's what he told members of the media after appearing at some community events in Florida. During OTAs, he re-aggravated the AC joint in his throwing shoulder, the same one he had season-ending surgery on during his rookie year. From there, AR was quickly ruled out for the rest of OTAs and minicamp, and even though Shane Steichen sounded hopeful they'd get him back for training camp, not everyone was buying that. After all, he had been meeting with the team doctors, and then he actually met with the same doctor that performed the initial surgery on him to get a second opinion. Thankfully, it was decided that another surgery wasn't needed and that rest was the best thing for him. In talking about his recovery, Richardson said he feels like he just tripped and fell, but got back up and hit the ground running again. The problem for AR is that while he was tripping, Daniel Jones walked right by him in the race for the QB1 job. That's not just my opinion either. James Boyd of The Athletic said that Jones has already taken a significant lead in what was supposed to be a wide open competition. And John Middlecoff's hot take from the Colin Cowherd show this week is that Daniel Jones could even manage to take Indy to the playoffs. I don't know about all that, but I can see Danny Dimes snagging the starting role. The Colts brought him in with the intent of there being a position battle, and while Richardson may have initially had the upper hand because he's been in this offense for 2 years now and is familiar with the system, it's no longer that simple. After he went down in late May, it's been Daniel Jones that's taking all the first team reps, and a lot of them at that, since Richardson hasn't been eating into them at all. AR is going to have to, number one, prove that he's healthy, and two, prove that he can bring more to this offense than Jones himself can. Sure, Richardson is dangerous as a dual threat, but you have to wonder if they hold him back a bit more in that regard because of not wanting to further injure that shoulder. If that's the case, it's a bummer because his biggest strength is taking off and running. It's his pass game that lacks consistency and honestly stresses me out. AR was actually the only quarterback in the entire NFL to finish last season with a sub 50% completion percentage. Is Daniel Jones a massive upgrade here? Probably not, but he may be a better option than a young, inaccurate quarterback with mounting shoulder problems and a lengthy injury history in general. Now, another quarterback worth talking about is Aaron Rodgers. And I know you're sick and tired of hearing about this guy, but don't worry, you might in theory not have to for much longer. Well, that's because he appeared on the Pat McAfee show today and talked about a number of things, with one of them being his potential retirement. When asked if this was his final season, his last ride, he said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is it. That's why we just did a one-year deal." For him, coming to Pittsburgh was about finishing his career with more fun and peace. His 2 years in New York were obviously a train wreck, between tearing his Achilles year one and then only winning 5 games and missing the playoffs year two. So now he gets a chance to finish his career on more of a high note with an iconic franchise like the Steelers. So that's the plan for Aaron Rodgers, but what is Pittsburgh going to do at quarterback next season? I know I'm looking a bit ahead here, but it's an interesting question to think about. They brought Mason Rudolph back on a 2-year deal this offseason, so he will be around next year, which is an option, I guess, technically, but there's also their 6th round pick from this year's draft in Will Howard. Statistically speaking, it's pretty improbable that Howard becomes a longtime starting quarterback in the NFL as a 6th round pick, but not impossible. 25 years ago, Tom Brady was drafted 14 picks later than Will Howard was this year, and more recently, Brock Purdy was the last pick of his draft class, so again, it's not impossible to become a starter as a late round pick. Plus, a year under a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback like Aaron Rodgers certainly can't hurt. Rodgers himself seems pretty stoked to get to mentor Will, telling Pat McAfee that he wants to help him out as much as possible and set him up to be the guy for the Steelers moving forward. Let's stay in the AFC North for a second, though, because we got to talk about this pretty wild quote from a Bengals player who anonymously ripped the organization. If you guys remember, the NFLPA released their annual team report cards back in February, and they didn't look too favorably upon the Bengals. Remember, these scores are made up of anonymous survey results from actual NFL players that was on the roster for that season. Over 75% of NFL players participated in the survey too, so this is a huge sample size. One of the categories that Cincy particularly scored poorly in was treatment of families. They scored a 4.69 out of 10, or an F-, as was shown on their report card. Well, ESPN recently spoke with multiple Bengals players about that category and grade specifically, and while they remained anonymous, they shared that up until last year, they didn't have an indoor post-game area for families to meet. Instead, they had an outdoor area that was just a large white tent about 20 yards away from the player's parking lot. One player referred to it as a show, and yeah, for a multi-billion-dollar corporation, that's pretty crazy. It's yet another bad look for a team that's in contractual stalemates with both their best defensive player in Trey Hendrickson and their first-round pick in defensive end Shamar Stewart. So it's safe to say that they've earned a reputation for being cheap, and stories like this don't help that one bit. It's only hurting them as a team too, because as this report noted, these surveys are very important in attracting potential free agents. For example, the Vikings earned the highest score in this category, and they were the highest graded team overall in 2023 and the second highest graded team each of the last 2 years. It's no coincidence that they've had massive free agent classes the past 2 off seasons, which their newly signed center Ryan Kelly can attest to. He said it has a major impact on free agency, especially as a guy with a family who's looking for a new place to call home. Aaron Jones signed with them last offseason and backed that up as well, saying that when you know your family is taken care of, it makes it easier as a player. I do want to be clear about something though. There were many teams who finished poorly in various areas of this survey, including even the Kansas City Chiefs themselves, with many players noting their practice facility, training facility, and practice locker rooms need some pretty big upgrades ASAP. Then the Bills graded out an F- on travel. Meanwhile, the Eagles were an F in that same category. The Cardinals and Patriots had multiple F grades as well. So while that may have seemed like a let's pick on the Bengals segment, it's much more to point out how some of these teams make so much money, yet for whatever reason skip other important details in regards to taking care of their players along with their families behind the scenes. Next up, we've got to talk about this pretty insane case that the NFL was involved in where they were being accused of collusion. To be clear, this is a pretty complex situation involving multiple articles, an hour-long podcast between Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk and YouTuber Pablo Torre, and a 61-page document that they said is secret, and the NFL did not want public. They basically went through it a couple of times, and this is all they found out from said document. Here's what was said in that podcast near the beginning. Quote, the core of this document involves a closed-door hearing held over 10 days in July and August of 2024 that features witness testimony from all these people. You can see them all up here on the screen, but it's 25% of the league's owners, several high-profile quarterbacks that were due for contract extensions at the time, the NFL commissioner Roger Goodell, and J.C. Tretter, a former NFL center who served as the president of the NFLPA from 2020 to 2024. So there's context and where they're getting all this from, and here's the gist of what happened. The NFLPA believed that the league and Roger Goodell encouraged owners to reduce veteran guarantees and contracts, or at least they didn't want the new standard to become fully guaranteed. This goes back to 2022 when the Browns gave Deshaun Watson a historic, fully guaranteed $230 million deal. The owners then met at the league meetings in March of that year, and this is where it's believed the collusion allegedly started, at least in this incident. The NFL MC, or the NFL Management Council, reportedly did a presentation to the owners and encouraged them to basically not follow suit in what the Browns did with Deshaun Watson. The fear was if enough players signed a new deal similar to Watson's, then fully guaranteed deals would become the norm instead of an outlier like in Watson's case. That would make it harder to build a team and put together a competent roster under the salary cap. Well, that offseason, 3 different big-name QBs were negotiating new contracts: Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Russell Let's Ride Wilson. All 3 of them were looking for fully guaranteed deals similar to what they had just seen Deshaun Watson get. However, obviously we know now, none of them did. And in the 61-page report from the ruling of this collusion case, we found out some pretty interesting stuff, including text message exchanges between owners congratulating each other on their new contracts. After Kyler Murray signed his $230 million deal with $160 million of it being guaranteed, Chargers owner Dean Spanos reportedly texted Cardinals owner Michael Bidwell congratulating him on getting the deal done and said that this will greatly help them with Justin Herbert's upcoming contract. In other words, because you didn't give in to Kyler Murray's request of a fully guaranteed deal, now we don't have to with Justin Herbert. Then came Russell Wilson's deal. After getting traded to the Broncos, he began negotiating a new contract with them. Per reports, he supposedly believed that he was going to receive a fully guaranteed deal, but once it was all said and done, that deal was actually for $242 million, with $161 of it being guaranteed. And in the document, it was revealed that Broncos owner George Penner told people within the organization that other teams around the league will be happy with how the negotiations with Russ played out. The point is, why the heck would any of these owners care about what other owners are doing unless they weren't colluding in some capacity and trying to not let these fully guaranteed contracts become the norm? Now, for Lamar Jackson, he was entering the 5th year of his rookie deal in 2022, and he continuously told Ravens GM Eric DaCosta that he wanted a fully guaranteed deal. He ended up choosing to play under his 5th-year option. Then the following offseason, negotiations picked back up, but there was little to no traction on a deal. Lamar requested a trade in March of 2023. If you guys remember, that was the weird situation where there were reportedly 0 teams that called about Lamar or made an offer. And with all this talk about collusion now that this document has been revealed, it has people wondering if the owners basically colluded together against Lamar to send a message. It appears that Lamar realized he wasn't getting what he wanted, and he eventually agreed to that 5-year, $260 million deal with $185 of it guaranteed. For what it's worth, though, Lamar said the trade request was merely a negotiation play to try to get more money from the team. But who really knows? Now, despite all of this, the NFL actually won the grievance, even though the arbitrator Christopher Droney, who made the final ruling, said, quote, "There is little question that the NFL Management Council, with the blessing of the commissioner, encouraged the 32 NFL clubs to reduce guarantees in veterans' contracts at the March 2022 annual owners meeting." Florio then noted that the NFL avoided what could have been multi-billion-dollar liability because the arbitrator Christopher Droney accepted the self-serving testimony of no fewer than 8 owners that they didn't heed the Management Council's encouragement to collude. So yeah, it certainly looks like Goodell and the league at least tried to get the owners to collude. That much is confirmed. It's also clear why the NFL wanted to keep this document a secret, as it doesn't really cast the league or Goodell in the best light. Some then might ask, well, why would the NFLPA want to keep this so hush-hush since they're the ones who filed the grievance in the first place? Well, I would assume it's because the NFL won the case. Sometimes when those things happen, you're not allowed to speak on it afterwards, but at this point in time, your guess is as good as mine. At the end of the day, they wanted Deshaun Watson's fully guaranteed contract to be a rare one-off, and so far, mission accomplished, obviously aside from rookie first-round draft picks and a couple of second-round draft picks now. It certainly doesn't help the player's case that Deshaun Watson's contract became one of the worst in NFL history. That was just a train wreck of an ordeal, and I don't think owners will ever want it to get to that level, which is why this story is definitely believable. But hey, make sure to let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below. Is this a big nothing burger to you, or do you believe there is something to it? I don't know that anything will actually come from this, but it was crazy enough that I at least found it worth talking about. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below, and with that, I'll see y'all next time.